In this video, we're going to walk through one of my favorite frameworks for helping a business develop their mission statement and brand story. It's the exact same framework I use with businesses from solo operations all the way up to larger multinationals. And the reason that it works is quite simple, actually. It's because we're quite good at thinking in stories, in terms of narratives. Our brains are kind of wired to make sense of things in a coherent and single stream fashion. And so the act of trying to fit our various business activities, characters, motivations into a single coherent story can actually be one of the best ways for finding any inconsistencies in our kind of core values, our targeting, and how we're trying to meet the market. The good news is this framework is incredibly simple. There are just 5 questions. These questions are in order: which story are you in? What are the forces at play? What's wrong in the story? What's the desired change that we're trying to reach? And what's the character that's needed? So let's jump right in. This video is part of a larger series covering the Shared Client Workspace OS. So if you have that template, you can find the brand, story, vision, and mission block in the side menu. And if not, you should have the exact same view. So to begin at the top, we have a little overview of the 5 questions that we're going to cover through this exercise. We have a space for our mission and vision statements, which we'll fill in later after doing a little bit more work. But the first section that we're going to hone in on is the story's setting. So this is in response to the question, which story are we in? And it's really just to kind of help us set the scene. It's kind of helping us define what are the boundaries of the story, what's the kind of look and feel, perhaps who are some of the key characters, the technology that's being used, the age, the location. These are kind of the broader contextual cues which will help us just put some boundaries or scope around the story that we're talking about. So as an example, there's the story of Star Wars, for example, which is intergalactic. There's a look and feel that goes with that as well. There's a story of a modern technological startup, perhaps. There's a boundary around that story, the types of people that they're interested in talking to, it might be kind of a digital online experience. And then you might have something like a local bakery, and that's kind of a totally different look and feel. And we can already begin to exclude some parts from each story, some characters, some avenues will already be closed off because they're just not relevant to the story. So when we're setting the scene or we're setting the setting, we're just really trying to get the broadest context for this story. You can think of it as the universe or the world that we're in, just like Lord of the Rings is in Middle-earth. What is the kind of broadest setting for our particular business story? Now, within that story as it currently exists, without us, imagine that we're kind of separate from this particular scene. We're just looking at the scene as it is. What are the key forces? And we're just going to focus on 2 sides of this equation. The first side is the allied forces. These are the kind of positive trends or things that are going in what we feel is the right direction. So, for example, if the story was about modern education, maybe we have a business which is an online educational company, and we're kind of looking around at the story as it currently exists. We see some key players who are already leading the way for us. We see some key public figures, some intellectuals maybe, some companies that are already developing new technologies. We can kind of list particular characters, companies, individuals who are already pushing this story in the right direction. But we can also think more broadly about kind of attitudes towards online learning. We can think about people's familiarity with new tools. We can talk about the internet itself as a positive trend that facilitates this kind of new mode of learning. So for the allied forces, we can be kind of we don't need to be so discreet as to target out specific companies. We can just kind of generally say, what are the positive forces that are moving things in what we feel are the right direction. And on the other side, we have the counteractive forces. And these are, as it kind of suggests, the kind of negative trends. What are perhaps some of the things that we need to overcome or push against, or that we see going wrong in the story? For example, if we're sticking with this online education company, maybe there are some negative stigmas around online learning outcomes. Maybe an online degree doesn't quite have the stature that a physical, traditional, institutional degree has, and so that might be a barrier for people to embrace these new modes of learning, and that might be something that we think is a counteractive force. So again, you can list any kind of cultural, any technological forces at play, and again, this is pre-us, this is pre our business stepping in to the equation and just kind of looking at things, getting a feel for the lay of the land, as they say, and just identifying what are the key forces on either side. And hopefully in the process of teasing out some of the counteractive forces, you'll start to have a few tropes or themes that are emerging, which are going to help us with this next section, which is about really identifying what's wrong, what's going wrong in the story. Why are we even thinking about starting a business in the first place? Now, there's a little bit more of a write-up, some thoughts in the attached article that are with this block, but just very generally, we're kind of trying to put our finger on what is the main problem as you see it currently. Again, if we're focusing on this online education example, maybe the problem is that people are already going out and they're willing to teach themselves to self-educate online, but the precise problem that we're addressing is that they're not quite able to filter quality from low quality information, or maybe it's just the online education world is too confusing and so it's doing more harm than good. Something like this. Maybe that's what we feel is going wrong with the story. And just to kind of even drill this home even further, there's another prompt which is always kind of a bit of fun, but also quite helpful, which is let's extrapolate. So we've identified some themes which might be going wrong in the story. Now let's ask the question, what is the worst possible outcome for this trajectory? So we're going to try and paint the picture of a dystopian ending for whatever this bad trend is as we see it. So, let's say we're going with the online education story. Let's say that we're trying to paint this dystopian picture for a future where people get more and more confused, the quality of education degrades further and further, our youth are not equipped to deal with the modern technological world, and perhaps the high quality stuff remains off limit, and then a larger and larger mass of people are just kind of excluded and pushed out. And this is, you can have fun with this, you can kind of, you can be creative, and you can try to, you can get a bit dramatic if you want to, but the real point is by extrapolating and pushing, we're kind of teasing out what the underlying motivations are, and by kind of blowing this thing up into something a little bit ridiculous, we do actually get a better view on why this is an important problem to focus on in the first place. So let's say you've given yourself some time to really dive into the dystopian ending. It can't all be doom and gloom. We do need to describe the flip side of this story, which is what is the change that we're trying to influence. And it's not just about, things are going wrong. It would be better if they didn't go wrong. We need to be quite concrete in the version of this change that we'd like to see. Now, this is going to translate directly into the vision statement that we put down. And it's about painting a picture of the best possible outcome for the story that you've set. There's kind of a boundary around that. There's something going wrong in the story. As you've identified it, there's a boundary around that. And now we're going to set the most ambitious version of the change that we'd like to see. And we're going to try and be as concrete about it as we can. And so let's say we've sectioned off a very specific problem in the online education space. And the change that we're going to really, put our efforts into influencing is just, let's say, it's just clarity of information. So the ability to filter through good and bad information online. Now, I say it as if that's a small thing. Of course, that would be a major project. And if someone's working on that, please let me know how it's going. I'd love to see it. But you can see the idea is to be very specific about, the change that we're trying to accomplish. And then, the next step that we're going to have to make for the vision statement is, what do things look like once that change is enacted or influenced? That might be, again, the flip side of this dystopian ending, where youth and kind of people who are curious and interested have the tools that they need. They have ability to filter good from bad information. They make better decisions, all of that good stuff. And finally, after looking into this world, this story, these problems, these potential solutions, we get to insert ourselves into the thick of it. And we need to ask the question, what character would be needed to influence this change that we've just described? So we've gone ahead and scoped out a specific change that we're trying to influence, some kind of positive influence, some version of things that could be better. What's the character that would actually be needed to make that happen? Now, this is where we can both think about the resources, the skill sets, the talents that would be needed to influence that kind of change, but also if we're thinking more about brand guidelines, voice, visual identity, these types of things. This is where we get to start kind of scoping out traits, characteristics, tone of voice, these types of things, which are, again, we're trying to craft this consistent story, and our place within it also needs to be consistent. There needs to be a reason that we are the fun, accessible brand. It can't just be because we happen to like that, because we think fun brands are nice to interact with. Doesn't make sense in this story. So again, if we're thinking about online education, filtering good from bad, maybe a characteristic or a trait that makes sense for this brand is reliability, credibility. We need to kind of come across as, you can trust us to be the arbiters of deciding what's good and what's bad. Maybe that's a trait that needs to happen. But maybe we don't want to be too authoritarian. Maybe we want to have some kind of friendliness, accessibility, transparency. So you can kind of see that there are some traits which organically arrive for this particular brand character, because that's the type of character that would be needed. So let yourself kind of have some freedom, be creative, kind of don't be afraid to lean into your intuitions, because the whole point of this exercise is to kind of leverage those deep narrative pathways which we all have, and kind of let it spill out. What is the character that could actually make this whole story kind of come together in a coherent way? Let's give it some key traits. Let's try and flesh it out a bit further. And from there, it's really, if you have any visual design that's going on, if you have any tone taglines, you can also link that to the bottom of this page exercise, and you kind of are already starting to sketch out a bit of a brand book for yourself. So just to wrap this up then, we've worked through these 5 key questions. We should have quite a large brainstormed list of ideas and things that still need to be kind of figured out and developed further. But at the very least, what I'd like is if you're in a position where you could formulate a mission statement using this kind of this formula which has been provided, which is, in this particular story, my business helps to influence the desired change, which we should have now, by doing what the ideal character would do. So we can kind of, obviously there's a lot of wiggle room within that framework, but it's just something to kind of help you try and structure or formulate a sentence for what the particular mission is. And the vision statement is just a very clear description of whatever that desired change would actually look like. What does our story look like once this change has been achieved? So whether you're working on your own little projects, if you're part of a startup, or if you're perhaps working on a branding project for an external client, we hope that this brand story framework will be helpful for you. We covered 5 key questions to help walk you through it. And then we discussed how to apply the answers to those questions into a simple mission and vision statement. I'll also mention that if you'd like to start using this framework directly from the Notion template that we just covered, you can create a free account at landmarklabs.co, and from there you'll be able to clone any and all of our templates